Well, very good. Thank you, everyone. This is an incredible group of reporters on this call, and I want to thank you for covering this important issue for both our states. I actually thought, what better idea than to join forces between Minnesota and Arizona? As the people in Minnesota and Arizona know, there are just a few Minnesotans that like to go to Arizona at this time of year. And I also think it illustrates how this tariff issue affects states even when they have different focuses for their economy. What we have in common is that we are states that have incredibly strong economies that are working to build our relations across the world and trade across the world. And these tariffs truly have a devastating effect, not only on individual families, which Mark and I are going to explain, but also on our business and our growing businesses in both our states. I also was very excited to do something with Senator Kelly. We are friends. I once flew in a very small plane with him from Phoenix to Sedona, which something I won't ever forget as we landed on this mesa of an airstrip in Sedona. And I thought, okay, can't be better than flying with an astronaut. And he's really has some insight in this, which is from even also a national security perspective as well. Dan Glessing is with us, the president of the Minnesota Farm Bureau, who's just an incredible advocate for the farmers that he works with. I just saw him out in Washington. Patrick Sundberg is with us, the owner of Jack Pine Brewery in Baxter, who expects his price per can will go up because of tariffs on the aluminum that he imports from Canada. And then, of course, Steven Zylstra, that I'll let Mark talk about, but the president and CEO of the Arizona Technology Council. So we all share these concerns about these across-the-board tariffs that will raise costs for Americans and hurt businesses, workers, and farmers. Let's be clear, these tariffs won't lower the price of groceries. They won't lower the price of housing. They're actually going to increase these prices, and they won't lower the price of products that rely on every single day. Tariffs are taxes, and these tariffs are the largest tax increase in a generation. They will raise prices for the average family by more than $2,000 a year. We'll hear more about the impact on farmers and rural Minnesota from Dan and from Patrick as well in terms of the cost of some of the existing tariffs that are being putting on Canada. Beyond higher costs, these tariffs jeopardize our trade partnerships with our neighbors, Canada and Mexico. So we're in such a unique position here with Arizona, a southwestern state, and with Minnesota, a northern state. Canada is our state's largest trading partner. We export more goods to Canada, ranging from ag products to machinery to medical devices, than we do to our second and third largest markets combined. I want to say that again for the Minnesota press. Our exports to Canada from Minnesota are bigger than our second and third largest markets combined. In fact, in 2023 alone, our state exported $7 billion in goods to Canada. That's more than a quarter of all the goods we export. Damage to our trade relationships with Mexico and Canada will hit our farmers hard. More than 40% of U.S. corn exports go to Mexico. Can you imagine that? 40% of U.S. corn exports. More than 40% of U.S. ethanol exports go to Canada. You think about the soybeans to China and the like. This morning, our European allies imposed retaliatory tariffs on bourbon, boats, and motorcycles. And of course, we have Polaris with the Indian brand motorcycle, Harley Davidson next door in Wisconsin. Even more retaliatory tariffs are in the works and could hit ag products, including soybeans, poultry, beef, and pork, consumer goods, including refrigerators, washing machine, power mowers, and clothes. This is from Europe with their retaliatory tariffs over what the administration is doing. Canada's retaliatory tariffs hit computers, sports equipment, cast iron products, as well as pork, dairy, wheat, fruits, and vegetables. Other retaliatory tariffs hit corn, pork, and dairy in Mexico and more in China, as I mentioned. It is no wonder groups representing farmers, businesses, and workers have all come out against this. Chamber of Commerce, National Retail Federation, course, in Minnesota, we've got Target and Best Buy. And as Dan knows, the Farm Bureau said the tariffs will take a toll on rural America, adding even more costs and reducing markets for American agriculture goods. The International Association of Machinists called the tariffs on Canada misguided, and the United Steelworkers have said, for our press from up northern Minnesota, that these tariffs threaten the stability of industry on both sides of the border. So at a time when we face growing competition from a country like China and Russia, we should be strengthening our relationships with our trading partners. And I always look at the fact that our partners in democracies across the world are like 50% of the economy as it is, and that includes Japan and South Korea and the European nations, of course, China and Mexico. And then Russia is 2 to 3% of the economy. So why we would be cuddling up to Russia at the same time, and this is the administration, that we are dissing our trade partners make no sense from any economic sense. And I'm going to end with the words of Mark will like this. I'm going to end with the words of Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, the former Republican leader, who just said this month, this will be paid for by American consumers. And that is a fact. So I will turn this over to Senator Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate it. Thanks for bringing us all together to talk about these issues that affecting both of our states. Just an aside, you talked about a lot of Minnesotans spending a lot of time in Arizona. I'm trying to convince them to stay there permanently.
Okay.
This is not an ideal situation for you.
Subject for another day, but thank you, Mark.
We're enticing them. We got great weather. Got a growing economy. I know there's a lot of positive things about Minnesota.
How about your hockey teams? No.
Our hockey team moved.
I know, that's why I brought it up. Okay, continue.
Anyway, so hey, these prices and rising prices are hitting families across the country really, really hard. I hear it wherever I go. Eggs are now, nearly $9 a dozen at the Safeway that Gabby and I shop at, and tariffs are just going to continue to raise prices. And families in Arizona and across the country, they're just paying more. I mean, more for groceries, gas, everyday essentials, and it's only going to be compounded by Donald Trump's tariff plan. I think most of us on this call understand that these are taxes on working families and businesses. Certainly the White House doesn't or won't admit to that, but they're driving up costs when people are already struggling. And currently, in my office, I'm sure Amy's is the same. We're receiving phone calls every single day from parents who are struggling to keep up with rising food prices. We're getting calls from small business owners who have now been forced to raise prices on their customers. We're getting calls from manufacturers who are dealing with the skyrocketing costs for the materials to make their products. We're also a border state, and we benefit from cross-border trade on everything from raw materials to fresh fruits and vegetables. Unlike Minnesota, our biggest trading partner, as you would expect, being a southern border state, is Mexico. And Amy, I hate to one-up you here. I know that Canada is Minnesota's biggest trading partner and is bigger than the second and third combined. Now, Mexico is our biggest trading partner, and that's bigger than the second, third, and fourth combined.
There you go.
State of Arizona. So we've got a big issue with tariffs on Mexico. And one thing where our state has really been benefiting is our advanced manufacturing sector has been booming. We've been creating these great paying jobs in industries like semiconductor chips and solar energy and other clean energy manufacturing. But those industries, they all rely on supply chains that cross borders. And now those industries are also feeling the strain of these tariffs that are being put into place. And they're threatening jobs. We also, I talked about how much we um, certainly buy from Mexico. We also sell a lot of products, to Mexico too. And just a few weeks ago, I met with Arizona um, dairy producers and truck drivers at an association called the United Dairymen of Arizona. And they talked about how the tariffs that Trump put in place in 2017 affected them back then. Um, well, first of all, these tariffs are driving up costs. But the last time that Trump did this in 2017, it started a trade war with Mexico, and Mexico's retaliation to our tariffs on Mexico was to put a tariff on dairy products imported into Mexico from the United States, and it decimated their industry because 40% of the exports of the United Dairymen of Arizona go to Mexico. And that put Arizonans out of work. And when tariffs raise the cost of doing business, those costs get passed down to Arizona families in the form of higher prices on milk, cheese, other dairy products at the grocery store. And here's the thing, these tariffs are not helping American workers. And they are paid for by American families. I don't care what Donald Trump says about this. He is not telling the truth when he says these are being paid by foreign countries. It's just plain and simple. And they make things more expensive to do business here. And it pushes costs over to families. It makes it harder for businesses to compete, and that kills jobs. What we need is trade policies that lower costs, that strengthen our economy, that support American jobs, that make life more affordable. That's what we need. So we're here to call out these broken policies. Amy and our colleagues, we're pushing for real solutions that actually help families. And we're calling on this administration to end policies that are hurting the American people. So thank you. And Amy, I think back over to you, and we're going to start this conversation.
Okay, very good. Dan.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. For decades, American agriculture has strongly supported efforts to expand global trade for, for our and other trade products, tariffs to restrict American exports, also while increasing the cost of essential farming supplies. When agricultural goods are targeted, farmers lose access to key foreign markets, and it also jeopardizes opportunities to open new ones. For the last 8 years, there's not been a strong emphasis placed on expanding foreign trade markets, helping to grow our economy and the distribution of agricultural products that are grown here. More than 20% of U.S. agricultural production goes to foreign markets. In Minnesota, our trade relationship with Canada is particularly strong, as was mentioned. Food trade in 2023. Last month, I met with Saskatchewan's Minister of Trade and Export Development, Warren Kading, to discuss the critical role of trade between our nations. Agricultural products frequently cross our borders multiple times, transitioning from raw materials to finished goods. When you think of like piglets, they can cross up to 4 to 5 times that border, and there's a tariff on them every time. Beyond trade, agriculture significantly impacts rural jobs, rural communities, and networks here and around the globe. Tariffs don't just hurt farmers and ranchers, they also affect thousands of workers in related industries like shipping, processing, agribusiness. And farmers are already working on thin margins and are having to make significant decisions on how to keep their farm going, not only for themselves, but the next generation. I know this very well. I've got a few children that are interested in coming back. So how do we make that transition? And the true impact of the costs of the tariffs really won't be known until we come out with certainty of negotiated trade deals on the other side of the tariff war. We believe in a strong agricultural trade agenda that should focus on maintaining existing markets and enforcing trade agreements and securing new ones that expand opportunities for U.S. farmers And I just want to say thank you for your time.
Well, thanks a lot, Dan. Thank you, and thanks for being out in Washington as well, to make the case.
Absolutely.
You want to go to Stephen next, Mark?
Yeah.
So we have, a little fairness from
Yes, Amy.
north
So
to south.
Steve, as you mentioned, Steve Zylstra serves as the president and CEO of the Arizona Technology Council. So he really knows what's going on with business, especially high-tech business and manufacturing in the state of Arizona. This is what he does every single day. But as CEO, he's responsible for strategy and operations and finance and policy developments. And he represents 750 science and technology-based companies in the state. So with that, over to Steve.
Senators, thank you, and good morning or good afternoon if you're in DC. I'm here to talk about the real impact of tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, in addition to the 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports that went into effect today, which threaten the vitality and future growth of our science and technology enterprises here in Arizona. Arizona has become a nexus of innovation and technology, as the senator mentioned, significantly due to our strategic international trade relations. Companies like Lucid Motors have chosen Arizona for its advantageous location, allowing a direct connection to the robust Mexican automotive supply chains. The seamless cross-border movement of automotive parts is a prime example of a cornerstone that has led to our success in attracting major manufacturers. However, these tariffs on steel and aluminum can halt the progress and severely impact Arizona's economy. The aerospace and defense industries in Arizona, critical sectors within our economy, rely heavily on these materials. These tariffs will disrupt established supply chains, leading to increased costs and delays that ultimately will compromise our competitiveness and security on a global stage. Consider Arizona's trade with Mexico, our state's biggest trading partner, as mentioned earlier, which includes substantial exchanges of produce, auto parts, and machinery, and exceeded $38 billion last year. Economists are concerned that tariffs could push prices up to the point of affecting every aspect of our economy. Businesses thrive on stability and certainty. As we have seen, companies like Lucid Motors have made significant investment decisions based on the stability and predictability afforded by trade agreements like USMCA. The mere threat of tariffs can cause companies to rethink their investment and hiring strategies, potentially leading to a slowdown in the economic activity and innovation. Arizona is at the forefront of manufacturing industries of the future that are creating thousands of good-paying jobs. Our future depends on cooperation and stable trade relations. It is imperative that we advocate policies that support the growth and stability of our technology industries. And that's why I'm here today. And thank you, Senators, again for having us.
Very good. Thank you. And last but not least, Patrick, thanks for being on.
Thanks for the invite. Of course, as a small business owner in central and northern Minnesota, I don't directly import or export anything, but this is even going to impact me. As Dan mentioned, this is the tariffs on the agricultural sector. I'm definitely in tune with that. Most of our, I buy a lot of our grain locally from a local maltster, but they are obviously a global company, so they are importing a lot of brewer's grade barley from Canada. I don't know exactly how much, but I've gotten emails from them knowing that they are securing the supply chain, so they won't run us out if there's any hiccups in the supply chain. But they've made no mention of cost. We could expect costs to go up on grain, but the biggest one that I'm paying attention to is aluminum. Craft beer has really been synonymous with the aluminum can. There's a lot of craft breweries, upwards of 70% of all packaged beer, specifically craft beer, is in aluminum cans. So if the cost of aluminum rises, that's going to hit me. We had a cost increase in 2022, and there were a lot of other factors, including a tariff that boosted the can of price of cans back in 2022, I was seeing costs of up to about 60 cents a 6-pack, my costs. So by the time that transfers all the way down to the supply chain, we're looking at another $1 per 6-pack on the shelf, and that was back in 22. So I don't know where this is going to even out. The uncertainty is one of my biggest concerns. I've been in business now for 12 years. The first 8 years, costs were fairly consistent. The last 4 years, we've seen costs all over the board. So this will be another impact for us. The uncertainty is definitely a little bit nerve-wracking on my part. But at the end of the day, I have payroll to make. I have a bank loan that I need to pay off. And if my costs are going up, I'm going to have to pass that along down the chain. So I can echo that any tariffs coming down the line will definitely be a cost that will be passed down to the consumer.
And you want to, Patrick, just let everyone know how the town you're in, Baxter, right? How
Yes,
big
we're in
that is, because I
Baxter.
think people need to understand how this is going to really heavily affect rural Arizona, rural Minnesota.
Yeah, so I'm in Baxter, so we're the Brainerd Lakes area. If you draw a north and south line on the state of Minnesota, we are smack dab right in the middle of it. A lot of people call us Northern Minnesota because we're north of the metro area. But yeah, I'm in rural Minnesota, in small town areas, and this is going to impact the entirety. You know, we've got upwards of 200 brewers in the state of Minnesota. Many of them are packaging in cans, so everybody's nervously watching the price of these ingredients, both raw materials and cans, or at least hopefully most of them are watching those costs.
Right, and I think if people, the breweries, and I know you have them in Arizona too, Mark, but all of these, they use a lot of homegrown ingredients in Minnesota as well, so you're like double hit because of yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got one of the largest maltsters in the U.S., Raw Malting, right in Shakopee, Minnesota. But they are pulling grain from the entire upper Midwest, including Canada. So, you know, they are not only buying grain from Canada to malt it, but they're also shipping it back to Canada too. So they could potentially have tariffs on both ends of the spectrum.
Should we ask Mark to compete with us on tequila in Arizona?
I don't know the tequila business.
I'm just
We've got a
thinking,
lot of,
I'm
we've
thinking
got a
the
lot
Mexico
of,
taxes might affect, the tariffs might affect things,
Yeah.
so.
I don't know where, we've got a lot of brewers, like micro breweries. Gabby and I have a favorite one in
Yeah.
Tucson called Moto Sonoran. I don't know where their products come from.
Yeah.
They actually rely heavily on Mexico. I was in a conversation with them last week about USMCA 2.0, and they are very concerned about tariffs.
One of my big worries here as we get further into this year, some of the comments that Donald Trump has made on the campaign trail, but then more recently about tariffs on semiconductor chips and products, the suppliers to make semiconductor chips in the United States. It could be very disruptive. We've got a growing industry that is doing really well. We've got the one fab at TSMC that's producing very high quality wafers. The second one will start operating soon. The third fab's under construction, and TSMC has made this commitment to invest another $100 billion in the state. If this gets disrupted by this harebrained scheme of the president to tariff everything everywhere, which we know does not work and help a economy grow, it could significantly disrupt this great thing we've got going on in the state of Arizona. So it's a big concern of mine. I've talked to the chairman of TSMC about it. He went over to the White House before the announcement on the investment. I think he got some assurances that this wasn't going to happen, but when you see the president's policies of just wildly swinging back and forth between one plan and another plan, and adding the tariffs back in, taking them off, reinstituting them, putting them on steel and aluminum, which is it's not the way to run a government.
Okay, good point. And I think if we have questions in the chat line on this, any questions that people have, put him on there on this topic. We know there's a lot of topics going on, but we're really trying to get the focus on this. For one thing, the way the tariffs keep going on and off and on and off, clearly someone has the ear of the president here and there. But the problem is with tariffs, and maybe you guys can speak to this, is that the problem is with the tariffs is that once they are threatened, a lot of times people will go elsewhere for their products. So,
Yeah,
anyway,
Senator, if I may,
yeah.
the certainty is what farmers and ranchers really would like to have, and we just don't have that right now. But to your point, it's going to be a double whammy in the rural areas because of the products you're selling, but also think of potash coming from Canada. Over 80% of potash that we use it comes from Canada. So it's a double whammy, and certainty of trade agreements is kind of where we would really like to go and have some good negotiations there.
Mhm.
Senator, if I could add, what I hear from my members is that when uncertainty is in the air, what happens is they quit making important decisions. They quit hiring and they quit making investments. And that's what's going to really slow down our economy at the end of the day, besides the rise of inflation that you've all talked about.
Okay, a few questions here. One is, could higher tariffs lead to a decline in the stock market? I think we're already seeing this incredibly volatile stock market. And a lot of this is uncertainty. And I know from a farmer standpoint and a business standpoint, there's nothing harder when you're operating on slim margins to deal with more uncertainty. And so it's a combination of things, of course, but the stock market just volatility is a really, really big concern right now because we had some real serious work we should be doing right now, which Mark knows, on workforce and housing and childcare and the cost of healthcare and some hard things we could work on together. But that just hasn't been happening. I think one I'll toss to Mark here. There was a question, by the way, on the fentanyl thing. I mean, both of us strongly support more action at the border, have voted for work at the border, including this bipartisan bill that was negotiated by one of the most conservative senators around, James Langford, that was tubed by some of our Republican colleagues, but that would have put significant funding into fentanyl at the border. So we support all kinds of things, but especially in the case of Canada, it's a very small percentage that comes in. But the president has wanted to do this work has wanted to do things on tariffs for a long time, regardless of fentanyl. And he also is, by the way, threatening Europe now with all these tariffs. And of course, that's a very small percentage of fentanyl that comes in through the mail that way. So I just don't think that holds ground. But the question I was going to send over to Mark was that there's one from Matt about, is there any growing concern about these tariffs potentially damaging relationships with foreign trade partners and them potentially seeking alternatives outside of, well, we'll say Minnesota and Arizona, and talk about that?
Well, Amy, I think it's already damaged our relationships with our countries, and I think it's a lot harder to repair a relationship than it is to wreck one. And we've seen this not only with Canada and Mexico, but with our European partners as well, as we ratchet up the rhetoric on this. And I think the other important thing to remember about tariffs is it's a lot harder to get rid of them than it is to add them. We've just seen this historically. If you look at tariffs being applied throughout our country's history, in a trade war, they go up very fast, they come off very slow, because one country isn't going to remove a tariff without a trade agreement with the other country, and those things take a long time to negotiate. So that's what we're setting ourselves up for. I think the next president is going to have a very challenging road ahead of him or her to unwind the destruction that this president has put to the economy, not only of our own country, but of our allies. And our allies don't like this. I've got friends in other countries. They're basically saying to me, what the hell's going on? Amy, I've got to go vote, but I want to.
There's one question I know that your team wants,
Yes.
the
I'm
Arizona
about to
Republic.
address it.
We don't want to diss the Arizona Republic here, so
I
they.
know Ron Hansen from the Arizona Republic wants to know, he says the upcoming vote includes a provision to bar a vote on the emergency use of tariff authority. Can both of these senators speak on their planned vote on the CR and how the tariff provision plays into your thinking? It's part of the thinking, Ron. However, what we're faced with is two bad choices. We have a choice to shut down the government, or a choice to pass the CR, which I don't think is actually, this is my view, it's not actually a CR. It wasn't negotiated with Democrats and Republicans. It was Republicans in the House only. And it's not what we typically think of as a continuing resolution. So we're going to probably have this vote tomorrow. I am still thinking about it. I don't know where Amy is on it, but I am still undecided. With that, I've got to go vote on something else.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Amy, and thank everybody for being on this call.
Okay, and I just want to add one thing, is that the actual thing on the tariff, it was another, it factors in different ways, actually just on the House not being able to vote on them, and not us, except like anyone can put this together. So we wouldn't, it was a separate rule on the tariffs for the House. This is for the Arizona Republic, that they are protecting themselves from a vote on tariffs, which is just outrageous to me, but it actually had nothing to do with the Senate, and it's not part of the thing. However, I think that tool is really, really important, and now the House has basically zoned themselves off. They have cordoned themselves off from being able to say, hey, this really is an emergency, so you don't have the power to do this on tariffs, which is, of course, very unfortunate for our power in terms of taking on these tariffs. And I'm on a bill that would have helped us, that Tim Kaine has on the Canada front, that we'll probably still have a vote on in the Senate. I just have one last thing. Canada has threatened to turn off the power on the US side, which includes parts of Minnesota. This is from KVRR. So, as you know, the Ontario Premier, who's made quite a name for himself here in taking on these tariffs. And by the way, I do think, from a Canadian, someone who works with Canada a lot, I'm head of our Canadian American Interparliamentarian Group, to have that premier on the same page as the Trudeau party, now the Carney party, but the more liberal party in Canada. That just shows how angry the Canadians are about how they, as one of our best allies, have been treated. So, as you probably know, what happened in this case is they put on this tariff on the electricity only as a counter to what the administration has been doing. That would have fallen on Minnesota and New York and Michigan. And he recently took off the tariff, at least temporarily. So we're not facing that right now. But again, and then Trump agreed not to increase the aluminum costs. I'm sure this makes you feel good, Patrick. But he wouldn't go up 50%. He's only going up 25% tariff, which is still just phenomenally large. So that's where we are right now. So at this moment, we're not seeing it, but I think it is an example of what could happen if we don't get this situation under control. Targeted tariffs that make some sense, yes, but these do not make any sense, especially for states like Minnesota and Arizona that have such a strong economy in very different ways. But we have such strong economies, and we do a lot of business with the world. Our businesses export to the world, and we want to keep that. We don't want all these other countries trading with each other, and we're left out of the scene, especially when 20% of our ag production, I think the number is, Dan, goes to other parts of the world. These are our customers. 90-some% of our potential customers live outside of our borders.